Good morning. My name is Steve Carlson, and I'm happy to be presenting to you about interest-based bargaining, an action plan for one local school district. This was the focus of my research because I've been a building principal in one district for the last 10 years. In those 10 years, I have never been a formal part of contract negotiations between our teachers or our school board and central office, but because of my position in the middle, I frequently have been someone that either the superintendent or some of the teachers will come to sort of vent about the process. My perspective has taught me that though at the end of contract negotiation sessions, we are getting agreements that seem to satisfy everybody. I say that because the school board always unanimously ratifies the contract, and the teachers union, which has about 55 members, they're usually getting at least 50 yes votes and just a small number of no votes. So I was wondering, is there a way to get the same mutually satisfactory outcomes, but have a process that doesn't lead to so much angst and strife along the way, and in fact actually use that opportunity to build trust between the teachers and the school board and administration. As a result of my action research project, I've come up with an action plan that focuses on something called interest-based bargaining. You may know it by other terms such as integrative bargaining or win-win bargaining. But these are bargaining strategies that seek to have the negotiations parties figure out what are their big, more global concerns. What are they looking for in contract negotiations, as opposed to small, minute details that may be sticking points for one party or the other. I believe that our local school district should take steps to adopt an interest-based bargaining structure, both for the next time they negotiate, but also my plan addresses how to make it something that is systemic and goes beyond one session of negotiations. For step one, I recommend a book study. Now, there are lots of books out there that discuss the benefits of interest-based bargaining. Perhaps the most famous one that I found out there was something called Getting to Yes by William Ury and others. It's first published in 1981. It's been through a couple of editions. It's up there in the top sellers for business books annually. I think Amazon had it rated in the top 100 when I looked for business books in 2019. It promotes the benefits of what it calls principled negotiation, which would be another term for interest-based bargaining. My recommendation is that the superintendent lead a small book study. Invitations should go to any school board members who will be on the negotiations committee and the teachers union negotiators, if not the actual negotiators, because sometimes I know the teachers don't have those selected this far ahead of time. They should at least be seeking to engage with union leadership. My suggested timeline for this would be to start at no less than 1 year before the expiration of the current agreement. Step two of my plan would be to, after the book study is completed, promote the benefits of interest-based bargaining to a larger group of stakeholders. I believe the superintendent should make a presentation to the full school board. There would be participants from the book study within that room already, because you would have had probably 1 to 3 board negotiators take part in it as well. So those would be people that could help, supplement the discussion on that. But I think the presentation should go to the full school board. And I think there should be a presentation to the full teachers union. Now, this is assuming that there is buy-in from the teachers union on this. If the teachers union is not willing to engage in such a presentation to its members, I would recommend that the superintendent create a screencast, sort of like what I'm doing here, that goes over the benefits of interest-based bargaining, disseminate that to the teaching staff through email, and just sort of have it be a non-threatening way to explain the school board and central office's position on why this should be the strategy that the two parties engage in to have amicable contract settlement. My timeline for this, it'd be following the completion of the book study and approximately 6 months prior to the start of formal contract negotiations. Step three would be the first formal meetings of negotiators of both parties. Research that I did suggests that smaller teams are preferred if it's possible. Superintendent won't have any say on how many people come from the teacher's side. That's for sure. and the superintendent probably is going to have limited say on how many board negotiators come with him or her. But I do think that small teams are preferable. I think in these first meetings, they need to establish norms for negotiations. These norms would be based upon the lessons from the book study and that shared experience. I also think it's important that the lead negotiators, which my recommendation is the superintendent be the lead negotiator, and then whomever that might be from the union. I believe that these two individuals need to accept responsibility for holding their team members accountable to the norms. I've personally been in, several groups where norms are established, but there's not a lot of accountability for people that don't adhere to the norms. If the teacher side is feeling like they need to hold the administration side accountable to the norms during negotiations, or vice versa, that's just not going to work. So I think that it is imperative that members of each respective negotiating team have that lead negotiator who is going to hold their group accountable for adhering to the norms of interest-based bargaining. Again, using the lessons from the book study that would have been conducted already, the teams will have a transparent sharing of each side's broader goals. Again, not, I don't think that at this stage you would be getting down to finite details, just the big broad goals. For the school board, it might be, we want to have a 15% fund balance. And for the teachers union, it may be something about salary. It could be something about working conditions, but it needs to be big and broad goals that allow for the two sides to see where do their goals have some commonality, where could agreement possibly be struck. And then my timeline for this would be no less than 4 months before the current contract expires. I don't believe it's desirable for either side to have a contract expire. And my experience with this school district is that 4 months is usually enough time to get an agreement done. My step 4 would be to repeat steps 1 through 3 for subsequent contract negotiations. Now, research is suggesting that this process is going to be positive and mutually beneficial. So if done with fidelity, I do believe that both parties would want to engage in this type of negotiations process again. But there's a couple things to think about. First, repeating steps 1 through 3 each time there's a negotiation process, it's going to, if done with purpose and intention, it's going to really establish that this is a core belief of the district and how they want to get contract negotiations done forever and always. So it reinforces that commitment that I think is essential. And additionally, I have noticed that though, some superintendents have more longevity than others, school board members, again, the same is true. Some have more longevity as others, but they don't always seek to, participate in every contract negotiation. In other words, they share that responsibility amongst themselves. And then the teachers union as well. They're constantly seeking to get some fresh voices and fresh faces into negotiations. So it's highly likely that if a 3-year contract agreement is agreed upon in, say, 2019, by the time 2022 rolls around, you're going to have new key stakeholders at the negotiations table. So continuing to engage in steps 1 through 3, I think is important for our district to make sure that everyone that participates in negotiation understands what interest-based bargaining is and has a commitment to it. And the note here, note here is that there are different books that could be used for step 1 of the book study. You would not need to do the same book every time. In fact, that could kind of be part of the integrative process, is having the two sides decide which book they'd like to review. And then my step 5, and this is maybe the one that is perhaps the most sort of out of the control of all the parties, but I do believe that you should seek longevity within the position of superintendent. Now, there's lots of reasons why you should want to do that. My action research suggested that the superintendent in my action research study that had the most experience had the most successful outcomes in negotiations. And also my research suggested that one superintendent who was interviewed felt that as he gained experience as a negotiator for the school board, he got a lot better and he felt the process got a lot smoother. It will be necessary to hire new superintendents from time to time. So my recommendation is that the school board make experience with interest-based bargaining a priority. If that's not something that any of their candidates or their desired candidates have, then they just need to establish to the candidates that it's essential that they have a willingness to learn and then lead within this process. So then my conclusion, schools should seek more than just a settled contract with their employees. They should see this opportunity as a way to build trust. There's not many times that teachers are going to sit down with school board members or even the superintendent. So these opportunities should not be taken lightly. It's a great chance to enhance the trust between those two important parts of the school district, which is going to lead to a greater working environment and ultimately more desirable outcomes for students. And if done with fidelity, interest-based bargaining can accomplish that as well as getting to mutually satisfactory goals. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to entertain any questions at this time.